All right. As we've come back from lunch, we'll move on with our meeting. We'll go to item 33. This is out of the County Administrative Office. Mr. Espinoza.
Mr. Chair, just curious. We have 39. It starts at 1:30, a public hearing. I don't know if you want to wait till after we address all the regular agenda items, or would you like to hit that one first?
It's up to the rest of the board. Do you guys want to hear that item? Sure. Is that fine? Okay. Yeah. Let's go ahead and.
Anything to put.
So we'll move on to item 39 out of the assessor's office. Mr. Slavich.
Be careful, Tom. Don't be with her.
Let's get after keys here. Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Today we have 9 applications, probably the longest we've ever had, as I could remember. In your packet, you have the staff report, which I'll go over. And then behind the staff report, there's actually motions that you decide to approve any of the requests. The first one is a compatible use request. This is Doodlebug Ranches. This ag preserve has over 7,297 acres. It's under contract number 0103, and this is a cattle ranch, row crop lands, located about 14 miles south of Hollister on Cienega Road, near the intersection of Highway 25. The applicant is requesting to install 2 solar systems on approximately 2 acres of land in 2 different locations. Under a county ordinance 19-01023B, there's different categories of compatible uses. We have B5, which is a compatible use, which is a public utility facility, and also B9, which is other similar compatible uses as determined by the board upon a finding that the proposed use is incidental and not detrimental to ag use. We also have our Government Code Section 51238.1 talks about compatible uses and the 3 principles of compatibility, which aligns with our County Ordinance 19-01023F. And the basic premise here is that basically it's not going to take any excess land out. It's not going to affect the farming operation or the ag operation. So basically, in this application, there's 2 solar systems. It's going to require roughly 2 acres of the 7,297 acres. That's a fraction of less than 1%. The proposed use is incidental and not detrimental to ag use, and the energy generated from the solar will be used on the farm to offset the cost. And your Ag Preserve Committee recommended approval of this compatible use request. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions related to this first compatible use request from any members of the board?
I just want to make a statement that that this solar systems are designed for personal use or for their own use, and I just want to point out that they are not intended for sale or.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Tom, we're going to go through each one of these one by one and approve them as we go?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So at this time, I guess I'll open it up to the public for any questions or comments. Members of the public? See none, I'll bring it back to the board for a decision.
Tom, do you need this whole thing read?
I can just go through it quickly if you want.
Well, can we
the motion?
Yeah.
You know, it's I think.
Can we just do per staff recommendation?
Yeah, that's something Shirley recommended I do. But if you want to shortcut it, that's fine. Just ask me to bring you back a resolution in the future.
Okay. I move per staff recommendation that it might be easier just to read the thing. I make a motion to direct staff to return at a future meeting with the findings that this request meet the criteria of the San Diego County Code 19.01.03 023 B, C, and F in the California Code 51238.1, and that the Agricultural Preserve Advisory Committee recommended that the Board of Supervisors approve this compatible use request based on the findings and conditions of approval set forth in San Benito County Code 19.01.023 B, C, and F in the California Government Code 51238.1.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next one we have is Herbert. This preserves 74 acres, contract 7716. The land's used for row crop. It's 5 miles northeast of Hollister on Fallon Road, off of Fallon Road. The applicant is requesting to place a modular home on the property for their daughter who works in the business selling farm produce. There currently exists one residence on the preserve for the owner of the farm. Our county ordinance 19.010 through 3C indicates one dwelling unit shall be permitted. Any additional dwelling units need to be for the operation of the farm. And there's also 3 principles of compatibility, which are on your staff report. So in this situation, the secondary residence will be for someone who's going to help on the sale operation of the farm, and the proposed use is incidental and necessary for the operation of the Ag Preserve. Your committee recommended approval of this request. And any questions?
Any questions from members of the board? Okay, at this time, I'll open up to the public. Or questions or comments from the public? See none. Bring it back to the board for decision.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve per staff recommendation and to bring back a resolution.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next compatible use is Krieger. This is 323 acres, contract number 7828. It's a property that's 25 miles south of the Hollister, actually 32 miles south of Hollister on Airline Highway. Majority of the land is used for grazing. We have about 20 acres vineyard, 1 acre site for the ranch caretaker home and other buildings. The request is to build a home for the landowner. In this situation, the requested residence for the operation is for the operation of the ranch, and the amount of the acreage needed is less than about a quarter acre of land, and your committee recommended approval of this compatible use request.
Okay, any questions from members of the board? This time, open up to the public. Questions or comments from members of the public? See none, bring it back to the board for decision.
Make the motion per staff recommendation and direct staff to return at a future meeting with the findings.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next compatible use is Manning. This preserve is 545 acres, contract number 7319. It was previously 1,115 acres, which shows on your contract that's been crossed off because it was divided into 2 preserves several years ago. The land's used for grazing, and it's located west of San Juan Bautista between Highway 156 and San Juan Highway. The applicant is requesting to reactivate the old Nyland Quarry, which was in operation in the 60s and 70s. And the site preparation is 7 acres for the area, and then a total area utilized for the operation of 25 acres. We have an ordinance in place that allows processing of mining operations, rock, sand, and gravel, and so forth, and is deemed compatible under the Williamson Act. In this application, the amount of total acres required is approximately 25 acres of land. That represents less than 5 acres of the total preserve. The committee recommended approval of this compatible use request.
Okay, this time, are there any questions from members of the board? No. Okay, open up to the public. Questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for decision.
Well, since I saw Shirley come in, I'm going to read the motion. I make a motion to direct staff to return to a future meeting with findings that this request meets the criteria of the San Bernardino County Code 1901 dot 023B, F, H, and I, and the California Code 5123 8.1 and 5123 8.2, and that the Agricultural Preserve Advisory Committee recommended to the Board of Supervisors approval of this compatible use request. Based on the findings and the conditions of the approval set forth in the San Bernardino County Code 19.101.023B, F, H, and I, and the California Government Codes 5123.8 and .1 and 5123.8.2, period. I think that's probably the last time anybody should read these motions.
Should have learned from me in Jaime.
No, you and Jerry.
Is there a second to that lengthy motion?
I will support Anthony second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we move on to the division requests. The first one is Appel, 573 acres, contract 69001. It's a cattle ranch, 23 miles southeast of Hollister on Panoche Road. The request is to divide the 573 acres into two preserves of 331 acres and 242 acres. The minimum acreage for grazing is 160 acres per preserve, and the income requirement is $3,500 per preserve. These two preserves meet our minimum requirements for income and acreage per our county ordinance, and your Ag Preserve Committee recommended approval of this compatible use or this division request.
Okay, any questions from members of the board about this first request?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Tom, they're selling part of it, or the
Yes.
part that they're dividing.
Yes.
And it's under the Williamson Act?
Yes.
Both of them are. But I thought that there was, if it goes to a different owner, that it will no longer be under the Williamson Act. Is there a provision there that I'm missing, or?
No, the contracts stay with the land. So we have a moratorium. We're not allowing any
New
land
ones.
coming in, new land that's not in the Williamson Act. If you're reading the Williamson Act, you can do a division request, a lot line adjustment. You can do a compatible use and so forth. But so if they divide it, yes, they can sell that piece. It'll still remain in the Act. There'll be a new owner, though.
So it goes with the land, and it will still continue to be under
Yes.
the Act? Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions from members of the board? Open up to the public for questions or comments. Nothing? See none, I'll bring it back for a decision.
Move.
To approve for staff recommendation and bring back a resolution in regards.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, next division request is Bailey Whitman. It's 893 acres, contract 1305. It's a cattle ranch 15 miles southeast of Hollister and Piscinas. The request is to divide the 893-acre preserve into two preserves of 413 acres and 480 acres. It does meet the minimum acreage and income requirements, and your committee recommended approval of this division request.
Any questions from members of the board? Any questions from members of the public? Questions or comments? Seeing none, bring it back for a decision.
Move to approve with the commission's recommendation, bring back with a resolution at a future date to a board of supervisors.
Okay, motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next division request is Blackburn. This is 746 acres. Contract number, there's two of them, 68-100 and 68-900. The property is used as a vineyard, walnut orchard, and row crop farming, and a cattle grazing as well. 8 miles north of Hollister on Highway 156 and Pacheco Pass Highway 152. The request is to divide the 746-plus acres into three preserves of 38 acres, 312, and 396 acres. Most of the land out there is vineyard, with balance in grazing. So in this situation, all three preserves would meet the requirements of our county ordinance of acreage and income. And the committee recommended approval of this division request.
Okay, any questions from members of the board? Open up for public comment. Questions or comments from members of the public? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for a decision.
Motion to approve, to direct staff to come at a future meeting with the recommendations.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next division is Gov BOS. This is 120 acres, contract 1017. Land use for a vineyard, orchard, and grazing combination. It's 14 miles southeast of Hollister on Limekent Road. The request is divide the 120 acre into two of 40 acres and 80 acres. There's some new plantings out there, olives. They're not producing yet. Takes some years to produce, but the main emphasis there is that it's going to meet the $3,500 income requirement in the future. The minimum acreage for a vineyard is 10 acres, dry farming is 40, grazing is 160. You can do a combination of all three categories as long as the percentages of all three add up to 100% or more. The 40-acre piece, as I mentioned, has about 11 acres of olives, and it exceeds the 100% requirement. The rest of the ground is used as grazing. The 80 acres has 4 acres of vineyards, 9.5 acres of dry farming, and remaining as grazing. And it also exceeds the 100% requirement. The two preserves would meet the minimum requirements of our county ordinance, and your committee recommended approval of this division request.
Okay, any questions from members of the board? Open up to the public. Questions or comments? See none, and bring back to the board for a decision.
I'll move for approval and bring back to a future date.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the last division request is Swank. This is 56.9 acres, contract number 7814. It's row crop land, 7 miles north of Hollister off of Fairview Road. The request is to divide the existing 56.9 acres into two preserves, 12.5 acres and 44.4 acres, and also adjusting the boundary line of APN 161410. It's a 10-acre minimum there. It does meet the minimum acreage and income requirements. Regarding the lot line adjustment, section 1257, 7 conditions, it does meet all 7 conditions. The 4.57 acres is going to be adjusted, will remain 4.57 acres. The line's being moved to take in a building that the property line actually cuts in half. So that lot line adjustment is going to resolve that issue. The committee recommended approval of both the division and lot line adjustment request.
Okay, any questions from members of the board?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Tom, there was in pencil added to the 12.5 a +1. Are we approving
It's
13.5?
Well, it's 12.5 plus or minus. In other words, when they do the survey, it might come out a little bit more than 12.5. Might come out.
But in essence, it's 12.5 acres.
Yeah, it could be a plus or minus depending on how the survey comes out.
Oh, okay. All right, get it.
That's why there's a plus there.
+1 or minus on the other side. Okay.
Yes.
I see what you were doing. Thank you.
Gotcha. Thanks for that clarification, Tom. Any additional questions from members of the board? Open up for public comment. Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, bring it back for a decision.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair, per staff recommendation and bring back a resolution at a future date.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I'll leave the originals with you.
Great.
You need to sign them. Give them to Janet here.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking me early.
No problem. Okay, moving on, going back up to the agenda, item number 33. This is out of the County Administrative Office. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item, I've asked Sarah Fontanos to or De Leon, excuse me, to come and to your board to give your board an update on the regional park project. There have been some questions that have been raised concerning the progress and where we're at. So I thought it'd be fitting to have her come here today to give a presentation to your board and give you and the public an update. Sarah?
Thank you, Ray. Okay, great. So what we should have before us, tell me if I'm wrong, regional park. Notice of availability for the EIR. The big thank you to County Council and Brent from the RMA for getting this through. The Parks Commission was thrilled. You'll notice on our park planning webpage, sbcparks.org, we've noticed the public that comment period is open. We'll also be posting it in the paper as well for their next deadline this Friday. I'll be working with Janet on that. But basically, this is the draft environmental review document for our regional park, River Parkway. So it's approximately 31-acre regional park that's situated right outside of San Benito High School in a 20-mile river parkway. They have, find you the page, but at least today, in addition to giving you the information that it's available and sharing it with your residents, I'm hoping that the board will support the staff's recommendation, which I'll kind of start with to help you out. We're looking to reaffirm, if one doesn't already exist, an ad hoc committee for the Regional Parkway River Park project. The Parks and Rec Commission will be appointing this August a 2-member committee to focus on the Regional Park River Parkway. Unfortunately, our last meeting we didn't have a quorum. Otherwise, I would have those members available for you. But we're just looking for their support and general outreach to make sure during this comment period we're receiving thoughtful and a full amount of outreach to the public. There are several items that were listed in the report that this regional park has been contingent on, specifically our relationship and partnership with the high school and City of Hollister. As your board may remember, the City of Hollister adopted, I believe it was a resolution, or it may just have been in City Council minutes, but that they weren't going to be willing to negotiate any kind of closure of Nash Road until they saw the park access road built out. And there were also several other conditions of that statement. I think what you have before you with this notice availability finally coming out, in addition to knowing that San Benito County and the high school has been working towards a joint use agreement, just furthers the county's commitment to the project. I also provided you our expenses to date, not only for the EIR, but for acquisition of land nearby for this project. And our intention is to have a joint use agreement, a long-term agreement, 20 to 30 years for the regional park area. Our partnership will always be with the high school. They are the neighbor over there. So staff's thought on that was, rather than trying to go through the long process of buying the land from them, to just do a joint use agreement of the area, helping each other prioritize what types of recreation the county and community members have, in addition to the school's priority, and meshing that together at the regional park to create that long-term partnership. Also on here, we have just some house cleaning kind of items we're working out with the high school in addition to the joint use agreement, some parcel cleanup. There is half the park right now is in the City of Hollister, of the proposed park, and half is in the unincorporated area. So we're working with them to make sure it's all unincorporated and the use of our impact fees are appropriate for that area. And we're also working actually with Sunny Slope Water District as they're interested in putting some water lines. So as we're trying to build out this road, it's a perfect opportunity to work with those people to get water and any other items, complete streets, while we're trying to do that. So the request today, in addition to answering any questions, I'm just hoping that the board will support the direction we're moving, or otherwise provide any other kind of direction if you want us to go towards the path of buying rather than joint use agreement. But otherwise, with the expenses in mind, we're hoping to bring on board an engineer. I don't know if Adam's here. I think we need civil drawings basically to start the process of the road, building those specific designs. So that's the next step that we'll be moving toward. So if there's any questions?
Hey, sir, I have one question. As far as, bringing, that engineer on board and to start that whole process, what are we talking about as far as a timeline? So, this is one of the issues in our jurisdiction that is actually in my district. Everything's always outside of my district. And so I get a lot of questions about the timeline, about Nash Road closure, about the construction of an eventual bypass, I guess you can say. So what is the timeline, as far as an estimate?
So honestly, Chair Rivas, for the civil drawings, at minimum, I would give it a year in my conversations with Adam. So that's just a year for the design plan. We do have the funding set aside through our CIP, so I don't think that piece will necessarily be the issue. It will be the point of staff you have on board to handle it. Adam is pretty thinly spread as it is. I've been other projects as well. But I think setting the money aside and just being aware that it will be bringing on consultants to make that timeline much smaller. Obviously, we'd most likely be going outsourcing for the build-out of the road. So I would say a 2-year timeline for design and build-out.
Okay.
You can hold it against me since I won't be here if it's longer.
So probably take it with a grain of salt, maybe 2 times 2 for 4 years?
I hope not. I hope not.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Patel.
Yeah, what scares me is that none of us will be here when this thing gets built out. But I'm going to be here for 5 years, the way it looks, 4.5. But should we have some sort of agreement in place in writing first before we go off and start doing design with the road and what we're going, who our partners are in this thing first before we go off and start doing a lot of work on our own?
It's a great question, Supervisor Botello. We actually are working right now towards the joint use agreement, and our intention, at least what I've been working out with Adam, is that we'll go out and start the RFP process for someone to do that, but we will not be spending money until some sort of a smaller conceptual agreement is in place with the high school. Recently, actually, what's been holding us up is all we have was kind of a blue highlight on a map. And you know how lawyers can be very specific, and they were hoping for civic drawings, which we don't have yet. So that's what's held up our agreement from this point. But we are working towards a middle ground to come together, knowing that this notice has gone out, that the EIR is out. I think that kind of solidifies for them the commitment that we have towards the project as well. So we're hoping that we will have something, a resolution or something from their school board before we start spending for that.
Yeah, because I really like to see something a little bit more formal than what we have. We've kind of had this a lot of work done already with the parks plan and what we have now, and we really don't have any partners. We own property. Worst comes to worst, we make a park with the property that we own. And go forward with and putting something in that area of the, of the county.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm, obviously we want those commitments, but I'm really happy to hear that we're moving down the route of a joint use agreement. I think that is in everyone's best interest rather than acquiring land and going through that process. I think a county our size that we should be looking at more joint use agreements with other entities. I think that's the right approach. Absolutely. Supervisor.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to speak as a member of the Veterans Commission, and when I hear the word, at one time, joint user agreements, to me they sounded great words when I first heard the concept. Now, in fact, Supervisor Munzer serves on the committee with me. We now experience a different concept of the idea joint user agreement because at the Vets Park, the Little League, the Babe Ruth, the women's softball, it's always run by organizations, and somehow the public is not allowed to use those fields without going through basically get an act of Congress. And I don't want to see this park if it is to move in that direction, to have those kind of relationships and those kind of ownership titles. I don't want to see that because, pretty soon they say, well, the high school was going to use it from 3 to 6, 3 to 7, Monday through Friday, and pretty soon Saturday and Sunday too. And so the public gets not able to use the park. That's the best way I can say it. And so from my experience serving the Vets Commission and hearing a lot of these user groups coming to the board, and telling us, this is our park. We invested in this park. We put a lot of money into it. Therefore, we're entitled to it. We can direct who gets to use it or not. I don't want to see that happening to this park. So, fellow supervisors, you heard my thoughts about, joint use agreements concepts.
Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Supervisor De La Cruz that those joint use agreements can be vague and they can have a lot of ownership on one end and the others miss out on the other end. But I think we have learned from those joint use agreements that we can develop one that works because this joint use agreement will only be with the high school and the county. So you're not going to have all these other organizations as part of this agreement. And I actually like the idea because when I was on the school board, on the Hollister School Board, we had a lot of joint use agreements with the city of Hollister for where we together built baseball fields, tracks and that sort of thing. And it actually worked quite well. So it's really in developing it early with the right wording to make sure that nobody loses out on use and that we respect the use of the high school because the students will have access to it first during school hours. But taking that into consideration, I think we can have a lot of flexibility. So thank you.
Supervisor Botello.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Supervisor Barrios and the chair. But I hear what Supervisor De La Cruz is saying, that maybe a portion of that area, that park, could be open and available to the public all day long, and restrict the high school area, of course, that for the security of the students. In San Juan, if we recall, we worked with the school district there, and put that park in San Juan, and that with a joint use agreement, and that's worked out very well. The public has access to it all day long. The school is secure, and everything. If we could do something along those lines, I think it would be fine. But when we get to that point, I think we have a few hurdles to overcome yet.
Yeah, and thanks for your comments, and I appreciate what Supervisor De La Cruz is saying. But I view this as an opportunity to provide public access, because when I think of the high school and I think of all the fields they have, they're closed to the public. If I want to go play soccer with my friends, I can't unless I'm going to jump a 20-foot high fence. It's private property, and I think this is an opportunity to establish a joint use with the high school to make this park accessible to everybody, whether you're a student at the high school or you're a member of the public. I think at Vets Field it's a little different because you have these organizations there, and it has been an issue. And I think that we can avoid that in a place like this. I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of access, right, and having a true recreational area for everybody to enjoy. So, are there any other comments?
Just another one. You make a good point in having access, and a lot will depend on the actual design, because it may be designed in such a way that part that we have a joint use agreement is something that is not going to be used by the high school on a regular basis. It's just going to be a joint use just for formality, so we don't have to purchase it. So it may be more flexible than we think, depending on what goes in there. If it's a swimming pool, obviously there has to be more detail and time constraints. Right. But yeah, design will make a difference.
Absolutely.
So at this point, what staff will be working on, by staff I mean Adam Goldstone, since he's not here, we'll put it on him. We've asked the high school to focus some major points of a joint use agreement. Obviously, we're not approving one today. I don't have one for you. But we've asked them to start with a specification of schedule, something open 365, specific to what's open, what hours are for the high school, and requiring a general public opening hours as well. Additionally, we wanted them to list what their priorities are for recreation, given their school needs. I heard they're looking at softball fields eventually. So to kind of list out their priorities so that we can match them up to ours, and again, the long-term piece. So we're definitely thinking of all of those things that you guys are mentioning, and we'll make sure, at least in the very conceptual form, because we do, like Supervisor Botello mentioned, we want some sort of agreement as we continue to move forward and spend money. So we're hoping at minimum we can start getting those basic concepts in mind of partnership and focusing on those areas. So,
Supervisor Munzer.
Sarah, what is the idea behind the ad hoc committee? Because I thought my understanding was this a whole concept originated in the Parks and Recreation Committee, and I thought, that they were going to be, leading
driver.
the charge of bringing
Yes.
this about.
So we can totally scratch that. I was at least trying to confirm whether or not there was one. I tried to at the last Parks meeting, but we didn't have a quorum. Set up the committee there. I just don't have them yet. So at the August meeting, we'll try to do that. And I just had that item there in the event that for some reason you guys already had one. So you probably answered my question, Supervisor Munzer, that it should focus in the Parks Commission. So we'll go back in August and have those two people appointed to help with the outreach and any questions during the comment period.
I have another recommendation, Mr. Chair, is that we can incorporate this part into the Facilities Committee. Supervisor Botello and I sit on it. It would be good to get updates and at that level, and then bring
Yeah.
it back to the full board. But I believe that you and I served when we were having all the conversations initially with the closure of Nash Road and all of that. We sat there as the Facilities Ad Hoc Committee. So I wouldn't mind having that part of it as well. And then you don't have to create a new committee.
Sounds good to me. Everybody else?
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Great. So it sounds like there's agreement for putting the regional park on the facility ad hoc committee. I don't know if I should have a vote for continuing the direction of a joint use agreement, but it's sounding like everyone's agreeable to that idea. And then staff will focus on bringing back the conceptual agreement while working on an RFP for engineering services, but not spending additional money until we have an agreement and some sort of agreement with
in
high
place.
school.
All right.
Is it agreeable with the board?
If we need a motion, I can make a motion.
Yeah. Do we need a motion, council, for the?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we reaffirm the members of the ad hoc committee as the facility committee members for the regional park project, to direct staff to continue to work with the high school on the draft joint use agreement and boundary and parcel cleanup. Direct staff to develop an RFP for engineering services for the civil drawings of the park access road, and bring back a contract to the board for approval. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, and then prior to vote, I do want to open up to the public
Okay.
for comment. Anyone from the public wishing to provide comments on this item? Now's the time to do so. No comment cards? Okay. So with a motion and a second, I certainly will. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 34. This is out of our county counsel's office. Mr. Granger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Barbara Thompson, the Assistant County Counsel, will present this matter. This involves the settlement agreement regarding pre-annexation that was reached between the county and Chispa.
Chispa is an affordable housing project which is composed of 13 single-family residences and 41 apartment units. One of the apartment units is for the manager, which is required to live on site or to be on site, and the remaining 40 units are primarily for families with low and very low income, with a couple apartments set aside for individuals with mental health needs. The county entered into a master tax agreement in 2010 with the city of Hollister. Under the current agreement, the amount that would be paid per dwelling unit on lands that would be annexed is $10,748, which is on any residential unit that's constructed within the annexed area. Because of the litigation involving the current master tax agreement, it's recommended that the city and county enter into an annexation-specific agreement which pertains to this specific annexation. I should note that this annexation is in part publicly funded through both grant money in the amount of $1 million, and also money that's been provided from Behavioral Health Department, as well as tax credits that are also funding it. And it's being, CHISPA is a nonprofit that focuses on affordable housing. The item before the board today is composed of two parts. One is agreement between CHISPA and the county, and the second agreement is between the city and the county. The CHISPA county agreement, CHISPA agrees to pay $10,758 for each single-family home. That's the amount that would be due under the current master tax agreement. They're also agreeing to pay an additional $10,758, not associated with any specific unit, but within 30 days of the annexation, and that was calculated to compensate for the one apartment unit that was going to be dedicated to the manager. I should note that the units that are for affordable housing are going to be having a 55-year time period, so they're affordable housing for the long term. Under the agreement, CHISPA is agreeing to pay the amount for those single-family homes. It's being waived pursuant to revenue. It's being waived for the apartment complexes. The agreement sets forth the revenue and taxation code that is cited, which is 214. And under that code section, it provides that an organization that's eligible for that has to be a nonprofit, and that the property that is used has to be used for the specific charitable purposes, nonprofit purposes. So that is this property does qualify under that revenue and taxation code section. Let's see. So under the city-county agreement, they also waive all rights to challenge the fee, and that they agree that the fee shall be paid on those units upon the issuance of the building permit, and that that they agree that that fee shall come to the county, that they are not going to protest it or challenge it at a later time. The city-county tax agreement is an annexation-specific tax agreement. It tracks the current master tax agreement generally, but not 100%. There are some slight differences. It does have the $10,748 per residential dwelling. The payments are due quarterly. The money is due from the amount paid to the city from CHISPA. It's not from any city revenue. In general, that's one method that it differs from the current master tax agreement. I think that those are the key provisions to this agreement, these two agreements, and I'm open for any questions.
Any questions, members of the board? Okay, I'd like to open up for public comment.
Yes, I have a speaker, Gabrielle Torres.
Good afternoon. Gabriel Torres, VP of Operations, Project Manager for CHISPA. I want to actually commend the board for allowing CHISPA to come before you with this tax sharing agreement. Again, this allows us to move forward with our development, and if you haven't visited the site lately, I would encourage you to do so. We are framing already on the apartment complexes, and things are moving along very, very quickly. So this, by having this agreement in place, it does continue our project along, does not impede any of our regular timing processes to have for completion of these apartment complexes in March of 2017. And we also want to thank the city as well for agreeing to the tax sharing agreement, and we look forward to moving this project forward. And I again invite any of the board members to come out to the site and take a look at the development. This is just a small drop in the bucket that CHISPA is hoping to provide affordable housing in San Benito County, and there are other projects in the pipeline working with the county and the city, and we hope to get the support of the city and the county in these projects. So I can answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Just a comment, Mr. Chair. Gabriel, I want to thank you. I think your organization is a real asset for this community, and it's wonderful that we can partner and be able to accomplish. The end goal is to have housing for, affordable housing, and that is going to go a long ways, not all the way, but a long ways in that direction. So
Exactly.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to have you as a partner.
Great. Thank you for your support.
Mr. Chair, I talked to Gabriel Alfred, who's the executive director for CHISPA. God, was it 4 or 5 years ago about the idea? And finally, we're moving forward today. Good job. I'm kind of sad that it's not the apartments that we talked about earlier, 3 or 4 years ago, but
Right.
it's a small dent, like Supervisor because I know we have a rental crisis in our community, and it's getting worse every day.
Exactly.
And this is not even a dent.
Right.
Sorry, Gabriel. I mean, but it's not even. In fact, I talked to Sonny Flores last night about the needs in the community, and he just says that every day his applications just get taller and taller. It's just amazing. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions?
Starts with the first one, and we go from there.
Okay. Are there any other no comment cards? Okay. If anyone else wishes to provide comments, now's the time to do so. Mr. Richmond.
Good afternoon. This time, Marty Richmond from Hollister. I supported this agreement at the City Council, and I'll support it here. I'm going to disagree with some of you, and I'll disagree with Gabriel. It's not a drop in the bucket. When you consider our vacancy rates are so low in the city, they're only 3.4%. In the county as a whole, they're only 4.8%. I think I said it was tied for the fifth lowest in the entire state out of the 58 counties. I looked it up with the data from the state of California Department of Finance. So it's not a drop in the bucket. 40 units and is 40 more units than we had before. Okay, and we don't have that many multifamily units. I sent you all, as I'm sure you read my emails, you can't wait to get them. I sent you all the newspaper article that was referenced earlier by council member, Supervisor Dela Cruz, about the fact that the state is considering moving money from the mental health to homeless housing. And also, I did not send you, I don't think, the article about in Washington, D.C., there's a big movement on at the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, to basically negate the zoning rules at local counties like ours so that they can put high-density housing wherever they want. They say they're claiming the zoning rules are discriminatory. The message is either we fix it on our terms or somebody's going to come fix it for us, and we're not going to like it. Okay? So we should take every opportunity we can, and this is a good opportunity. It's 13, I think, market rate homes, and so they help offset the cost of the high-density housing, which is exactly the best option. But it's not always a doable option, as I've also written you, because when the market is down, those homes don't go. But we know what's going on in the Bay Area. For the first time ever in Santa Clara County, the median home price has hit over six figures. It's gone over $1 million. And right now in San Mateo, the average home price is $1.2 million. And if you want a junk shack in Walnut Creek, it's $1.6 million. And if you buy something in Atherton, the only thing you're allowed to do is bulldoze it and build something new right over the top. So this is what's going on here in Northern California. And so we're 25,000 units statewide short every month. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Anyone else from the public wishing to provide comments? Now's the time to do so. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a decision.
Mr. Chair, make a motion that we approve tax sharing agreement with Chispa, and 2, agreement affecting real property, a pre-annexation and settlement agreement that will set forth an annexation, specifically agreement for tax sharing for the property currently being developed by Chispa.
Thank you, Supervisor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Moving on to item 35 for County Administrative Office, Mr. CAO.
Thank you. Yes, this also will be coming to you by Sarah De Leon. She'll be presenting to your board an update with San Justo Reservoir and looking at potential recreational alternatives and cost considerations. So we have Sarah here to talk about that. Sarah?
Thank you, Ray. Everybody should have a copy. Yes? This is very exciting. It's one of the more fun topics I get to talk about with all of you. I do have 18 slides here. We'll kind of go slow. It's going to be a lot of information. I'm sure you guys will jump in and want to talk about it. But just like the title says, we're going to discuss alternatives, start considering costs, and I'm going to recommend you some actions towards the very end. I'm basically going to outline 4, possibly 5 potential alternatives that range from very limited recreation to a dream of what San Justo could be one day if there were no mussels there. I do want you guys to remember, this is brainstorming. I'm not asking you to make a decision today. We do not have any approval from the Bureau of Reclamation to have recreation at this point. Again, this is a talking piece conversation. All costs I'm going to be discussing with you are estimates. I have not considered long-term maintenance as equipment gets older and older and needs to be replaced, so we'll keep that in mind. And the fact of just because I've listed certain items, there's tons of options. There are alternatives within alternatives. This is just kind of setting a framework and foundation for discussion purposes. So, as my good friend Joe Horwood would always tell to me, Sarah, when you're trying to talk about a plan, talk about how you got to the plan first. So how did I get to these alternatives? Some of these points helped focus how the alternatives came up. One of them being what can be made most available immediately to the public. 2, what costs the least? I know we are a general fund budget. We want to use our funding very wisely. And 3, shooting for the moon, hoping we land among the stars. I think alternative 4 will sing that quote very loudly for you once you see what it is. Some other goals that helped focus the alternative. What is the Bureau most likely to approve? How can we best mitigate risk so that they're more likely to approve a recreation plan? And to get something approved, basically, what this conversation will help us with later is developing that recreation plan. Now remember, through past meetings, we are working towards eradication. Depending on how successful eradication is, recreation could look very different. If we're 100% successful, we have more opportunity for more recreation out there. At this point, we are somewhat shooting at a target in the dark because I do not know what they're most likely to approve. I have asked them for a white paper on risk and what they're willing to accept. We have not received it yet, but to kind of help focus our attention. But today, we'll just kind of be talking about different sorts of options. And hopefully later on that attention can be focused, and we'll talk about that towards the end. So, alternative 1, hiking only. Wanted to show you guys some fun pictures. What could potentially be out there is picnicking, barbecuing, perhaps just hiking around the perimeter of San Justo. Alternative 1 focuses on just that. Right here we have some examples of ramadas that rather than those more expensive solid structures, there's some screen-type canopies that are coming into style. They keep the place a little bit cooler. They last a little bit longer, and they're quite a bit cheaper than those solid structures that you might see in other locations. Basic picnic, basic barbecuing, and hiking is alternative 1. Now, in thinking about risk in alternative 1, you have to consider, well, how do we keep people out of the water? So in this alternative, the focus is basically on an additional fence around the perimeter. I've accounted for that cost in this alternative of building that fence. You'll notice we have equipment rentals and supplies. Most of this will be standard throughout all the alternatives you see. In alternative 1, the main piece is that there's an additional fence, and you can see that total towards the bottom. Again, an estimate, but ongoing being approximately $300,000 and one time almost $1 million. Now, I do want to point out that there are grants available through the Bureau of Reclamation, so one-time costs will not be paid for by ourselves, so don't let it totally scare you away. Write down questions. We're going to go through this. I know it's going to be a lot. I've bolded out law enforcement costs as well as kiosk and attendant costs. Law enforcement, just because in speaking with our sheriff, there will be a need to enforce certain things, and I've gotten an estimate from him. In this, it's just one deputy. The kiosk and attendant, because data collection is going to be critical in determining what the alternative and what recreation looks like. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Mr. Chair, Sarah, $100,000 for one deputy. Tell me that.
Healthcare.
No, but is it dip?
Oh, sorry. It's my last day. I'll tell it like it is.
You know, I'm beginning to get a little attitude that you're out the door already. Okay.
Short timer syndrome. I apologize.
Notwithstanding that thought, $100,000. You tell me that 100% of the deputy's time is going to be at the lake?
Probably not. I'm in all of these alternatives, and I do apologize. Forgot to mention this. That's rather high. We're looking at opening limited over the weekend, Friday through Sunday. I didn't do the entire thing. In regards to the Bureau, though, and their idea, if the gates are open and available, I just thought it might be nice to have somebody full-time to be checking on it. Since it is open, maybe people are more likely to go out there during a weekday when actually the gates are still closed, but they may attempt more so to try to get in if they know, well, it is supposed to be open. So that was the rationale kind of for that.
I don't agree, but
Okay.
I understand.
No problem. Noted. So fence structure, the question in alternative 1 is, will it be worth it to open to hiking when we have to pay for something like a fence and it's hiking only? Is that what the public wants to see?
Sure. Sarah, did you determine how many acres are available for hiking?
I do not have that. I think it's on here somewhere, 597 acres of recreational space. So that's actual the land mass area. We don't have.
But that includes the reservoir itself, doesn't it?
Yes. No, it doesn't. It's just the land around it.
Oh, okay.
And the perimeter, it's about 4 miles of trail around it, which is what
okay.
this would focus on.
Okay, so it's a little bigger than I thought
Yeah.
it was. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
So just keep this one in mind. Again, numbers are very rough estimates. Thank you, Supervisor De La Cruz. Oops. Did I skip 2? Oh, sorry. I guess my pictures got messed up here. Alternative 2. Oh, no, that is right. So this one is a little bit more focused on, it should be on shoreline fishing with the addition of hiking. So you'll notice as we're going through alternatives, they're kind of building on each other. So the first one's hiking only, potential fence. The second one, there's no fence because we're thinking about shoreline fishing as well. So you'll see similar costs with the addition of inspection and prevention control because this is under the assumption that there are still mussels there and it's pre-eradication. So some considerations, again, for ongoing costs, mainly being from any type of catch and release program. Will there be someone there ensuring that fishermen and women alike are cleaning their equipment properly? In speaking with some bass fishers, it seems that they would not be happy to have to dispose of any types of rods or little fixtures. I guess they can be quite expensive. So the idea would be cleaning. Again, that would potentially go out later for discussion. No decision being made today, just bringing these things up to think about. But there is risk there, and if someone is bringing equipment with them and taking it back with mussels in play, that's going to be a problem for the Bureau most likely. So there's significant cost put here for the people as well as the program. Okay? I'm going to move to alternative 3. We're going to build again. So in addition to hiking and shoreline fishing, we're also going to talk about use of the actual body of water through rentals, kayaks, paddle boards. This one also focuses on it not only ups the maintenance workers from the items before, there is additional dock repair. Again, we mentioned the kiosk and attendant for data collection. As we go through these alternatives, you'll notice that risk is higher and potentially more difficult to control, so we'll really have to be addressing that in this alternative. The inspection program becomes larger if there is mussels involved. The hope is that the rentals, as a lot of members of the public and your board has said, well, why don't we just keep everything there? Well, that's what Alternative 3 focuses on. Skiffs, kayaks, paddleboards, that type of thing being rented out. I wanted to also point out in this section to start thinking about administrative policies also for recreation. And just doing a little bit of research, how would we handle beer at a location like this? How was it handled in the past? What policies would address those types of things? Other types of services as well, but that was just something. I saw some beer and permit guidelines from the state of Arizona. I thought it was rather interesting, so just food for thought. In the 4th framed alternative, it considers, now this is again, shooting for the moon, landing among the stars. This also is a part of there is no mussels left. With the equipment that I'm about to talk with you about, it would be probably not the best benefit to have a live mussel population with the type of expensive things we're talking about here. I'm not sure how many of you have been on a floating campsite. Anybody? No? Okay.
What was the question?
A floating campsite. Have you ever rented one? This is an image of two. So the idea here is that it is actually a floated dock. I've learned a ton from California State Parks, Lake Oroville, where they actually have 10 of these in play. They have fluctuating lake levels, and these guys actually do stay sitting on top of the water. They've gone down to as low as 40 feet with 10 of these in their lake. Now, feasibility would have to be discussed, obviously, with someone who is a professional in something like that, like state parks, whether or not it would work out at the reservoir. But currently, they charge $175 a night, and kind of an ouch. But for those individuals who enjoy camping and want to be on a dock and fishing from their own campsite with solar-ran bathrooms, this is the opportunity for them to do that. Alternative 4 focuses on this with the ability to camp overnight. Learned about a mooring system, just if you were curious of how it's held down, put that information in there for you, because like I said, I learned a ton from California State Parks. This alternative, thinking that floating campsites are a huge reach, I also put here, perhaps it's just a floating restroom or floating docks, and this is what Alternative 4's costs focuses on. Again, additional law enforcement, additional staff to care for vessels like this, a huge different fleet of inventory to even maintain something like that. So you can see quite a difference in cost. The last few slides I've just compared 1, 2, and 3, and 4 for you for your own review and any questions. But the point of this is a ton of information. My hope is that we can have this conversation through the Parks Commission. Their meetings are in the evening. It might provide better opportunity for the public to come in, help us focus on which of these alternatives, number one, they feel is potentially a waste of time. If they are really looking for use of the water, maybe trying to go just hiking isn't enough for the majority of the population out here. That will better give us an idea of where we want to focus for our recreation management plan. But that is staff's recommendation, is to push this to the Parks Commission. They are setting up a committee to have for outreach of this item. Alternative 3 is my best bet at this, or excuse me, was it 3? Alternative 2, it should say, with the shoreline fishing is going to be staff's recommendation, just firsthand looking and being working with the Bureau of Reclamation and what they're most likely to approve and kind of the framework we set up in the beginning. But again, important to have public input on it and what they would like to see to better point our arrow correctly at the target so that the Bureau is more likely to approve it. So, any questions?
I have a question. Sarah, do
Yes.
we even know at this time what the Bureau of Reclamation will even allow us to do? Has
Most likely it is
specific about, okay, mussels, and I mean while mussels are still
Right.
in the lake.
no water use at all, most likely.
Okay, so, why would we even consider some of the other alternatives if we already know that's not going to be, because to eradicate them, it's not something that happens overnight.
It's not,
It
right.
has to be done, it has to be tested and done and tested, and you have to make absolutely sure that there's not one iota of mussels.
Right.
So, if we want this to be something available to the public immediately, then we need to go with alternative 1, and then just make that as a recommendation and move forward with it quickly. In the interim, Bureau of Reclamation can be doing with our cooperation, of course, or our cooperation with them, be doing their eradication effort.
Right. So in thinking, there's also in red here alternative 5. So perhaps it's no action at San Justo. Perhaps it's looking elsewhere. Because it was a question of also the cost. So in alternative 1, and I absolutely agree with you, Supervisor Barrios, are you guys willing to pay for the fencing and maintaining the fencing? It's going to be a NEPA process, as we learned from the Bureau last time. If they're to open to recreation prior, they will go again through NEPA. And so to me, that's even more time. So perhaps the next step is, and they've said themselves, rather than opening it now to shut it down later, to open it again while they're going through eradication, perhaps it's the alternative 5 of leaving it alone and starting maybe to look at other options elsewhere for water recreation. I don't know.
Yeah, Sarah, very good report. I appreciate it, but I'm going to have to throw cold water on it. I'm not very pessimistic that the Bureau would let us do anything, much less the water district out there, whether it's hiking or anything. The risk far outweigh the gains. We have a lot of other areas with parks that we could address, like what we spoke a little bit earlier. I think our energy's got to be more focused onto one park. If we're to do the regional park, let's take our money and our focus, our limited staff, and do the regional park. Let's get that done. Let's forget about this. And sometimes we put so much food on our plate we can't possibly eat it all. And we're real good at the county doing that in different areas. And I think this board would be better served directing our staff, directing our Parks Commission to get this thing done at the regional park and let this play out for a little bit longer with the Bureau and not waste too much energy and time on this, because it's not going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I was talking to the members of the fishing community, nowhere near did they ever talk about walking trails or recreation facility. Their concept was always the ability to fish. I do like the report, thank you. However, it doesn't in any way, which way, fits within the means of what their needs are. And at the same time, like Supervisor Batallo said, it's a lot of money. That doesn't even address the fishing concept. I guess we got to go back to the drawing board and think about other issues. It's just way too much money, and some of the members of the community say, let us fish now. We can work these things out. And in your presentation, there's just no way of even thinking about that type of concept. So these are not available. These are not, in my book, these are not acceptable options. Let's just put it that way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually up there a couple weeks ago. Had a granddaughter's birthday beyond the reservoir, and as I was leaving, I drove around the facility knowing this presentation was coming before us. The shade structures are there, and it sounds like you're not even planning on utilizing them. They are falling down from lack of neglect.
Yep.
There's one large one that's all the way on the ground.
Yep.
Several others that are not far behind it. The road has weeds growing up through it. The road going to the back of the dam has slippage, which the county has addressed over time. So it does definitely have a lot of issues. As I was driving it, I wasn't sure how much land we actually had out there. If it is in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 acres, that could be utilized for hiking. That's almost enough. But as Supervisor De La Cruz said, that's not what the public is looking for, or the majority of the public is looking for. They're looking for the fishing. I do appreciate your plan. I'm glad you're going to stick around and see this come to fruition. But I think we need to continue to work with all the other agencies. The water is very low right now, and whether it's low enough to put in the potash and deal with the mussel, I don't know. But I think we just need to continue to work with all agencies. We'll have a newly elected congressperson here pretty soon. Maybe we can utilize their office in the very near future and enlist their help to getting the situation resolved. But I think we definitely need to resolve the mussel issue before we go forward on any real solid plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moser. And I want to thank staff. A couple months ago, Mayor Velasquez made a big brouhaha of nothing. He came up here and erroneously accused this board, and me in particular. He went to social media and said, Supervisor Rivas is responsible for keeping San Justo's gates closed. One of those people from Facebook called me. He posted my picture up there and said, call Supervisor Rivas. He's keeping it closed. And so one person called me and said, man, I didn't realize you had so much power that you could keep the gates closed at San Justo. I said, well, I don't have that much power. You've been misinformed. Let me educate you. And I think our last meeting, we were all educated. We all realized that this is way beyond the control of the San Benito County Board of Supervisors. This is, a federal facility, as we learned. All we can do is do our part to make sure that we can work towards a solution to open it up sometime in the future. It may never open up. That's the reality. And it's unfortunate that Mayor Velasquez is not here today. He, tried to score some some political points. And I think he finally realized that we don't have any control over that facility. It's unfortunate he isn't here so he could be educated as we all are. But I want to thank staff for the amount of energy that you have put onto this issue, especially recently. And as I appreciate all the comments. I support all the comments that were made. I think that these aren't viable options. I think that we have a lot of interests from our library to a regional park, working on joint use agreements, and essentially, as much as we do want San Justo open, it just isn't feasible at this time. But certainly, we will continue to work with other agencies and with our new members of Congress, or our new member of Congress, whoever that should be, to hopefully find a solution in the future and hopefully get some relief. I think that there are a lot of issues that we need to work through. This isn't simply opening up the gates and letting people in or allowing people to jump gates to go enjoy this facility, because certainly there's nothing to enjoy right now. But thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I do some
Supervisor
comments, Mr. Chair. I think it is the responsibility of this board to continue to put pressure on the Bureau of Reclamation, because this is very irresponsible of them to not act on it. This is a very serious matter, that if any other lakes get affected, or infested, whatever, with the mussels, it can really put us in a crisis situation. So I think we need to be more proactive and just keep the pressure on them to do something. And we know that we can't do anything, but at least, try to get that done, not just for the recreation, but just for the sake of having, not having that risk in our backyard. But I agree with Supervisor Botello. I think, this is unfortunately not something that we can move forward with. Let's concentrate on bringing the community another form of recreation, and that would be a regional park. We've invested a lot of money, a lot of time, and I think we need to continue that effort. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other comments?
I just wanted to say thank you for your direction. It's much appreciated, and we will continue focusing our efforts on getting the Bureau and the Water District through the eradication process.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Oh, sure. At this time, I'll take public comment.
Shot number 5. Marty Richmond again. I know you've all heard many of my opinions on this before, but I like to come up here and get them on the record so that people can latch on to them, do whatever they want. I doubt if it's ever going to open up again. That's just my personal feeling. I just don't think anybody's going to be willing to take the risk. And even if they are, I think we have a pretty good idea how long it's going to take, which is forever plus 2 days, okay? So what should we do? I think we should, Sarah had alternate number 5 up there, and I think we should do alternate number 5. I think for the people who want to fish and want recreation involving water, we ought to at least put an effort into try and find things that already exist and explain to them where they are, what the limitations are, and say, look, here's where you should go. Now, I understand the public has a lot of capability of finding it themselves if they had the time and the energy to do so. But I think maybe we'll come up with a surprise or two, who knows, or maybe we'll crowd out the fishing at Supervisor Patella's favorite lake he talked about. Maybe it'll get so busy up there he won't be able to get into the shoreline anymore. Whether it be public or commercial, we should start looking for alternatives. Whether we do anything or not, maybe we can arrange, if we have enough people, maybe we can arrange to get them discount tickets, no cost to us, but for people of San Benito County, because we do have some joint things going on with the Hernandez Dam and all that stuff, and there's a lot of places you can't go. So I think rather than just say, well, yeah, we're going to concentrate on the River Parkway, which we need to do, and other things, many other things, an enormous amount of other things. Unlike Clearview,
Clear Creek.
Excuse me?
Clear Creek.
Clear Creek, thank you. I'm having some problem thinking today. Unlike Clear Creek, this is a real threat. I never believed Clear Creek was a real threat. I think it was all baloney myself. There's no question that the zebra mussel is a real threat. I don't think anybody's coming up and saying it's not. So, and because it's a real threat, it's going to take a long time to fix. Clear Creek, they're never going to fix, and it isn't even a real threat, so you can imagine when you compare them. So what I think we should do is get our recreation, either the staff or the organization that is responsible for recreation in the county or the board or something, to go out and do a survey and say, here's where you can fish, even if it's commercial, and here's what it costs, and here's where you can boat, and here's what it costs, and here's what the hours are, here's what the rules are, etc., and go out and see if we can offer them some alternative. They may have to go another 20 minutes on the highway, but at least they know where it is and they know what's going on. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else wishing to provide comments on this issue? Now's the time to do so. See none, I'll bring it back. Oh, Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Ann Ross. I believe I spoke on this matter last time and probably commented on similar issues. In my opinion, and I think if some of the citizens of this county really were to think about how the board has to spend their valuable time and how to spend our resources in this community, in this county, looking for recreation for the people who live here, outdoor recreation, seems wasteful. These alternatives aren't viable because they're expensive, and the zebra mussel is, as Marty put, a real threat. End of story. We're done. We can get the federal government to try to help fix it so it doesn't spread up to any other reservoirs. That's the best we can do, so we're never held as a county liable for any additional damage. But as far as looking for a hill to climb or a view to see, we're living in a paradise area here. And I think it's irresponsible of the citizens of this community to think that it's the Board of Supervisors' job to find some place for them to have fun. At some point, your personal resources in terms of your energy and our money is tapped out. We have important things to look at, important jobs to do, homeless, shelter, affordable housing, everything else on this agenda. I don't know how many people stand behind me in this area, but in response to how the mayor handled himself with this and the rise he got out of the community, it was ill-informed, and I'm sorry to say, and I'm sorry to see that the community in which I live, people find themselves rallying behind this topic as opposed to the many that we have that are far more important. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, members of the public? See none, I'll bring it back to the board for final comments. If not, we'll move on. I don't think that we require any kind of...
The direction was great. Now I know for the future.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item 36 out of the County Administrative Office.
Okay.
Mr. Espinoza.
All right. This is our last item that we're going to be hearing from Sarah.
Final item.
I want to thank her in public for all the work that she's
Don't
done.
make me cry, Ray.
In administration. She has done a fantastic job, and I really appreciate everything she's done. I just want to make sure everyone heard that.
Thank you. Very emotional.
So with that being said, today she's going to be giving you an update with regards to CalCard. We actually implemented that some time back as a test, beta testing it. So we've done a few things with it, and she's going to go ahead and update the board. Sarah?
So, in the words of Supervisor De La Cruz, it works. Yes. So, we actually started a mini pilot with 2 individuals so that we could better understand the inner workings of the web-based system for CalCard. That was from administration and HHSA. We've had 2 very successful months, 2 cycles of charges. Our first little data point for month 1 was that we had 6 charges, and we only had to print 1 check. So that was very nice. It's small, but again, we only have the 2 cards available. The next biggest step of this was making sure, per our auditor's request, that the CalCard interface worked with the ERP. Actually, Nathaniel, thank you, Nathaniel, and Larry from Tyler Technologies has worked that out today, and I will be running through that with Larry tomorrow to show auditing how that interface will work. So it's sounding like wonderful news, and we can have a great new system and be able to keep everything in line. Again, the CalCard program is meant for those smaller dollar purchases. It's not taking over the entire purchasing process, but in the event that we're just trying to avoid the check being more to issue than the actual item was worth. So it's been successful thus far. Questions, concerns?
Any questions from members of the board?
Just one thing is that it doesn't matter how small the item is or how, there's still government funds and they belong to the public. So as long as we continue to be really careful with the safeguards, no matter what the amount, because they can add up to big amounts, I think this is a great way to save money, be more efficient, and in the end, we're actually saving the community the dollars because we have less people to process, less paper to print. So it's a really good thing. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
And staff. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anyone else? Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to piggyback off what the CAO said. Kudos to Sarah. I don't know. I think most of you know it, but I want to mention it to the public, that she wrote my transcript for my second trip to Washington, D.C. She worked very hard on it. She worked very hard after the fact, keeping on top of what the committee was doing, helping with response to them. We are losing a very valuable member of our organization. She was only here a short time, but she had a huge impact. And if this is her last presentation, I just want to take this opportunity to thank her from the bottom of my heart for all her hard work. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, I hate it when Supervisor Munzer goes before me because he takes the words right out of my mouth. But really, Sarah, we talked when you called me and informed me that you had a new opportunity, and I certainly tried to talk you out of it. But really, that's because I'm selfish. But I'm really, really happy for you. I think you have a bright future. I want to thank you for everything you've done for San Bernardino County, and who knows, you may be back here like Adam came back. But really, thank you very much for your hard work, because you put 110% in to every assignment. San Justo presentation just a minute ago proved it.
My pleasure.
So we'll miss you.
Miss you guys.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Thank you, Sarah. I knew we had a good employee when I walked into your office the first day, and I asked you, Legos? You have Legos in your office? She had every kind of Lego cars or houses. She's a builder. There you go. But I'm really going to miss the bagels and the granola bars you gave us in the past. So, thank you for all that time.
You're very welcome.
And I have some comments too, but I want to open up to public comment first. Anyone wishing to provide comments on this issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. So, Sarah, I as well want to thank you for all of your hard work and all the efforts that you made for all of us up here on the dais and in supporting our CAO. You're certainly a valuable piece of this organization. And losing you, you left some big shoes to fill. And so we're certainly challenged, other than the fact that our wages are way down than every other county next to us. But, we'll certainly, it'll be tough to find a replacement. But obviously we wish you the best. I know you're going to the city of Santa Cruz, and
Yes.
so we certainly wish you best. And our loss is certainly their gain. So thank you.
Thank you.
And so with that, this was just an update. Yep. And so we will move on to item 37.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
So this is out of an item out of Health and Human Services Agency, Mr. Ridingsward.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I can't remember the amount of times I said when staff have come and talked with me and said we need to get something done. I says call Sarah.
Yeah.
So it's she's got a great career ahead of her. So this item in front of you is kind of a part of what we're doing around housing and homeless services. I think I had this passed out to you today. We just kind of wanted to put it all on one piece of paper, kind of a blueprint.
Get it, Jim? I'm not sure that we did.
Did you get it? Yeah. I mean, this is not anything.
It's in there. It's not an additional piece of paper. It's in.
No, it was passed out this morning. I can bring you one. Okay. But we just kind of wanted to give you kind of an overview of what we're kind of looking at, kind of a draft blueprint, to talk about a continuum of housing and services for homeless people and for low-income people in San Benito County. So part of that is kind of an economic development strategy, and we have an opportunity to go visit a high-tech recovery recycle center in Indianapolis. I think we've talked about this before in some meetings with the homeless committee. And it just so happened Brent said, I'm going to be traveling across the country, and could you meet me in Indianapolis? And let's take a look at this together because I have a big interest in this. And we have our CETA consultants also meeting us there. And so this is basically a request to travel out of state, to go look at this facility, to learn what they're doing, to learn how they got it started, how did they pay for it, how do they sustain it, and is it an alternative that we might be able to look at here in San Benito County. I think if you look down at the bottom box where we listed kind of options, in San Benito County that we've kind of talked about. This is one of them. We've talked about a food processing center. In fact, we heard some things about a food processing center in southeast Los Angeles that has become very successful by using excess agriculture from Kern County. And in their low-income community, they're creating a food processing activity that actually takes that and puts it into cans and jars and then goes out and sells it in various places like farmers markets and things like that. These have been fairly successful, and this is one of the more successful ones, so we want to go take a look at it. And that's what the request is today, approval to travel out of state to Indianapolis.
Questions from members of the board?
Sure.
Supervisor Barrios?
Jim, I believe you said that this was presented to us with some of the homeless planning committee meetings.
Yeah.
And I remember very well, we had a representative there. And was it somebody that was from out of state that came and did the presentation?
No, that was our CETA consultants, Ralph and Glenn.
That's
yes.
right.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this, that they have been doing this for quite some time, very successful. I would love to be able to take this model, and we have a resource recovery park, that we can maybe plan with, and we've now got our homeless service center. This is much needed, and like I said, very successful. It is worth every penny to try to create something for the future of the homeless folks. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Jim, actually, I know of this because of our recycling business. In fact, we're thinking of bringing some type of concept in which you can help those members that got out of prison or jail and try
Okay.
to give them a second chance. We looked at it that way.
Yeah.
Putting that aside, is this concept of this facility will be built at the Resource Recovery Center at the landfill or in a different location?
Well, that's been part of conversations that we've had, that, there is the 30 acres out on John Smith Road, that is potentially available for things like this. But again, that would all have to be worked out, and we've got to go through all the stuff with RMA and come back to the board and, say this sounds good and we want to do this. But I'm convinced that if we're going to deal with this overall problem of homelessness and low-income people in San Benito County, we need a multidisciplinary strategy and a long-range approach to making things happen.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Jim about this a little bit earlier, and I think this is a great opportunity. I want to be progressive as far as how we deal with the homeless issue. I believe the first step is to have the center, and the next step is to, provide for the skills that these folks will need to, get their life back on track. And to give them those type of skills, maybe it's be something like food preparation, like they do in L.A., or internships, with the private sector and partnering with them, because they're having a hard time getting employees too. And I think that could go a long way. But this sounds like an opportunity to learn something. I hope it's something that's altogether different than the homeless shelter in Santa Cruz. We don't need that. We need something that gets people back in a normal life. So I'm all for this.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make clear on this. When I read this last week and then last night too, it also is for those individuals that come out of jail and prison too, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's very important, because not to take anything bad about the probation department or our what's the criminal? I don't know what the correct phrase criminal system is. Anybody who walks out of jail, they're going to go back to jail because there's just nothing available. An employer will look at their background, they'll just deny them. So
well,
let me finish, Jim. I'm happy that we're actually moving forward at a project like this.
Well, I had a discussion with Ted about this before I brought the item, and he says, I really support this. He says, to the extent that we can kind of mix this in with the people that are coming out of prisons, our 1 in 9 population, and make this work for us, he says, I really think that's a good idea. So
Perfect.
He said I could say that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from members of the board? Okay, I'd like to open it up to members of the public. Questions, comments? See no rush to the podium. Bring it back to the board.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve per staff recommendation.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving to item 38 from Human Resources Department. Looks like we have Barbara. We doing the presentation?
Yes. Before the board today is the last collective bargaining agreement for this negotiation cycle. It's for the Law Enforcement Management Group, which is composed of 4 employees. It basically continues the maintenance of a fixed dollar amount for health insurance. It grants the county to leave CalPERS after meeting with the insurance committee and receiving their recommendation. It has the same language, about 70% at 65 for health insurance as the other bargaining groups. It provides a one-time payment of $2,000 upon execution of the agreement. It provides a 2% salary increase following October 1st, 2016. It has a 2.5% additional pay for post-management certificate, which is for the sheriff's captain's job classification. As far as sick leave for those employees hired after March 23rd, 2016, the sick leave payout upon retirement is reduced to 25%. It also has a one-time cash out of 50 hours of vacation leave or admin leave, or if neither of those are available, for sick leave for the positions of the Lieutenant Corrections and Superintendent of Juvenile Hall. And basically, before the board is a resolution approving the collective bargaining agreement and authorizing the CAO and the county auditor to take necessary steps to effectuate the purpose and intent of the MOU, and authorization to sign the agreement, and then to make any technical edits as later identified.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Any questions from members of the board? This time I'd like to open up for comments from the public. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for decision.
Chair, I make a motion that we approve as recommended by staff.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
This time, I believe that we will adjourn back into closed session.